Today, we will close our sermon series on fellowship and hospitality, and that is in turn part of the 7 marks of discipleship. You know them, right? We've been talking about them: prayer, study, worship, service, giving, fellowship, and rest. We started last fall with a program on rest, or Sabbath. After the new year, we moved on to worship, and now we are looking at fellowship. The sermon series will conclude today, but we will continue further. We will continue together to learn about and learn and practice, Christian fellowship and hospitality, all through the summer and, well, just through the summer. Then we'll move on, actually, to service in the fall. And of course, all of the marks of discipleship and all of the programs surrounding them, the workshops, the book groups, the small groups, the guest preachers, all of that, they are intimately connected to our mission: transforming lives through the love of God in Christ. And so today we continue with fellowship. And I want to talk about fellowship and how it intersects with the gospel reading this morning by telling you a story about a friend. Her name is Susan Tabia. Susan is a child of war. She was born into war. Her childhood was spent in the midst of the first Sudanese Civil War, and all that comes with that: the violence and the hunger and the disease. That's what she grew up in. There was a brief peace, but then it started all over again in the second Sudanese Civil War. At that time, she was married, had a son, and was quickly widowed. She sent her only son to live in relative safety in the UK, an option that she herself was not afforded. And then she settled down, as it was. She settled down alone in a refugee camp in northern Uganda, teeming with hundreds of thousands of others from southern Sudan, women and children, the elderly, orphans, widows, where they had no help, no doctors, oftentimes no food. That was the milieu in which she was living in. It was in the midst of all of that, that she saw one child one day among the thousands. She saw one among the starving children. She picked one little girl, an orphan, called Robin, and she took that one child in. She lived in a crude hut. She had nothing but love. That one orphan became 2. The 2 became 5. Ugandan friend gave her an acre, just an acre, in town. And the 5 kids became 10, then 50. That became the Amazing Grace Orphanage in Uganda. The local Church of Uganda, part of the Worldwide Anglican Communion, along with exiled bishop from the Episcopal Church of Sudan, they started to help with her orphanage. That one exiled Sudanese bishop happened to visit an Episcopal church in Nashville years ago, and a seminarian studying at Sewanee heard about Mama Susan, as she's called, and her orphans. Before long, a few friends who were also in the seminary at Sewanee they went to see her makeshift orphanage. We went to see, and I have been visiting there ever since. Early on, we were trying to solve their problems. We put a lot of money and a lot of programs together. Some of them worked, many of them didn't. The second Sudanese civil war ended, and South Sudan was born. The people went home. Deanne and I helped to build a new orphanage in South Sudan. New partners came on board to help, but early on, we're only probably 3 years in the story, early on I asked Mama Susan, now that the orphanage is established, maybe we don't need to come over anymore, maybe just from time to time. You know, it takes a lot of money to fly from the US to Uganda. Wouldn't it be better, I asked, just to save the cost of all those American friends going over and just give the money to the orphanage? Why not? See, I thought that what we were supposed to be doing first was helping. Susan taught me that what we were supposed to be doing first was loving. She said to me, it's true that the programs that you do, they help immensely. But we can do without those programs if we have to. What we cannot do without is your friendship and your love. That is what is more important. When you come all the way over from the US, you live in our homes, huts. You share our same food, she said, and we did. We sing together, we worship together, and if we can, we work together. She continued, when you come to us, you bake in the sun with us. It's hot, there's no air conditioning. She said, she's talking about us, you get sick from time to time, just like we do. And we cry together. You hold our children and feed them and laugh with them. And that is more important to us than all of the money. She continued. You sacrifice to be with us. You're willing to share our pain, even if it's just for a little while. And in so doing, we all learn about Jesus, what it is in a very small way, what it is to hang on a cross with Jesus. See, I thought in the beginning I was the one on mission, a mission of help. It turns out Mama Susan was the one on mission, a mission of love to me, you see. Once I learned that, then I could continue. Now I could continue on mission because I had first understood that mission is love first. Love and fellowship. Then, if there's time and money, service after. That is what I learned from a widow and her orphans. What we do together is bound up in the cross. And in the cross is glory and suffering and love, which brings me to the gospel reading today. The gospel today moves through 3 different themes really quickly, from glory to suffering to love in the end. The story brings us all the way back to the night Jesus was betrayed, on the night of the Last Supper. On that night, after the meal, after having washed Jesus' disciples' feet, after all of that, Judas, remember Judas? Judas left. Judas left. Then Jesus continued to teach his disciples. Though Judas had left, Jesus still had so much to say, but he knew he was just about out of time. But just when Judas left, Judas himself, he set things in motion, things that could not be stopped. Judas knew and Jesus knew. Once Judas left, there would be no going back. Once Judas left, the die had been cast. Before one more day is done, Jesus will be killed. Judas knew and Jesus knew. And so, with that backdrop, you can, if you listen, you can hear the coming heartbreak. If you listen, you can hear the love and affection that Jesus has for his disciples. He said, as we heard, little children. He's talking to his disciples. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, but where I am going, you cannot come. Jesus knows, even though the disciples don't yet know, Jesus knows that he will soon be dead, and the disciples will be left in utter desolation with the loss of their Lord and friend. And Jesus is heartbroken for his friends. But before he talks about his coming death and the sadness inherent in that, he talks about, believe it or not, glory. See, I was getting ahead of myself. Jesus talks the last day, the last night, he talks about glory. Now that that Judas is gone, Jesus says, now that that's done, the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. Now that Judas has set things in motion, now that Jesus knows, thanks to Judas, that he will shortly be killed, only now can Jesus talk about his glory and his glorification, because Jesus will only be glorified by his death, by giving himself away to the world through his death, you see. In other words, for Jesus, Glory has no meaning without the cross, and Jesus knew that. There's no reason to glory for the sake of glory. There's only the only reason to glory is glory in others, so that the world might know how to love. Jesus' glory can only be fully understood in the context of the crucifixion. Dying on the cross is the ultimate expression of Jesus' love for us. You see, glory comes by service, and glory comes by humility. Glory comes by giving oneself away for the sake of others. So, in this movement of the gospel today, the first movement is glory. Glory in the cross of Jesus. The second is be in relationship with each other, like Jesus was with his friends. Because relationship sometimes comes with suffering, as we all know. Life is sometimes too hard to take without friends. So those are the first and the second movements. The third, then, is after glory, after suffering. The final movement is, of course, love. Jesus said, I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, so you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another, if you have love for one another. Jesus' new commandment is not so much an order as it is a profound prayer, I believe. A prayer and a hope that the disciples will live in Jesus' way of love. So it must be for us as well, who call ourselves his disciple. The love commandment that Jesus gives to his disciples is the center of Jesus' teaching and the center of the Christian life. The new commandment. Some scholars, some people ask, is it new though? Is it really new, the new commandment? After all, the Old Testament already said, love your neighbor as yourself. What about that? An Episcopal priest and scholar called Thomas Traeger unpacked it for me. He said, the newness of the commandment is not that love has never before been commanded. It has been. The newness is in the source that feeds this love, the humility of the Almighty as revealed through Christ's death, and the transformation of the meaning of glory from renowned, worldly renown to godly compassion, you see. We are not supposed to use words to tell people about the resurrection. We're not simply use words to tell about the meaning of the cross and the resurrection. We're supposed to use more than words. We're supposed to love one another as a way of embodying the truth that Christ reveals through his death and resurrection. There's another way to translate this verse that I think makes it even clearer. He would say, I have loved you in order that you also love one another. when we allow the love of Christ to take deep root in us so that it flourishes in all that we do and say to everyone, that is the first step in helping the world understand how Christ has transformed the very word glory. Glory comes through the cross, suffering with others who are suffering, and then loving in all things. So let's just tie it up, right? Fellowship, that's what we're talking about, at least in part. At the outset, 4 weeks ago, we said by fellowship we mean intentionally creating and sustaining relationships as a pattern of discipleship, a way of life rooted in, allied with, and promoting the reconciling love of God. We looked together. We looked at fellowship through the lens of Scripture by reading about doubting Thomas, remember? We read about Peter and Jesus having a fish breakfast, remember that? We read about John and his vision of a new heaven and a new earth. Finally, we looked today at fellowship by reading about Jesus and his disciples just before Jesus' death, when he gave his disciples a new meaning of love and glory tied up in the cross. So this is the pattern of fellowship for both good times and bad. We talked about it 2 weeks ago. The pattern of fellowship. Be together. Invite. I'm going to the cross. Will you come with me? You bet. Let's go together. Be together. Bear your crosses together. But be together in love no matter what. When you are together, even when you're on the way to the cross, don't be surprised if glory comes from a crucified Lord at surprising times. If we will walk with Jesus, he will overcome barriers of walls, barriers of doubt, even barriers of death. If we would cast the net on the other side of the boat, we will find what we are looking for. And if we can't see a vision of love, try again, and again, and again. He will show us his real glory, the glory of the cross, and in so seeing, we will learn anew how to love every day. When you live together, then, when you live together in fellowship, real Christian fellowship, when you live together in that way, well, you can build an orphanage in a war zone, or you can build a friendship right around the corner, as long as you have the glory of the cross and love. Just 2 ingredients, just 2. I can't wait to get started with you. Amen.